In this video, I'm going to show you a fairly quick and easy way to add just a little bit of sharpening to your final images. Welcome back to the channel. If it's your first time here, my name is Matthew. I am an interiors and architecture photographer based here in good old Kansas City. Now, if you were to survey, say, 100 different architectural photographers, each one of them is going to have their own unique style, tastes, and look in the images that they turn into their clients or that they post on their portfolio. But one common thing that I would venture to guess 100 out of 100 architectural photographers want is for them to look sharp. When it comes to the physical equipment that they're shooting with or the editing process itself, one common goal you'll hear time and time again is that photographers want their images to look sharp. So let me walk you through a technique that I personally love to use to really add that tack sharp look to my photos. So my first piece of advice when implementing this into your workflow is to do this as the absolute very last step in your editing process. So let's pretend that in this image, I've done all the adjustments with highlights and shadows and compositing and color correction, all that stuff. This is the final image that I would deliver to my client. But I want to really add that tack sharp look. So what do? For your photos, I'm going to assume two things at least. One, that you're shooting with a fairly closed down aperture, and two, that your images were in focus when you shot them. So if we zoom in here, I mean, this photo itself does not look out of focus at all. I mean, it looks pretty sharp on its own. But what we're going to do is kind of give it that little cherry on top look to really make it sharp. Okay, so step one, we're going to duplicate the background layer. And just to be safe, I'm going to do it again. We're actually not going to mess with the original background layer whatsoever. So this top layer, I'm going to label high pass. And I apologize that it's cut off from the screen recording, but I'll tell you what I'll do. So with this top high pass layer, I'm going to go over to filter, select other, and then clearly high pass. So the goal here with this high pass look is to adjust the radius so as just to get a pretty strong idea of where the edges of the objects in the image are. In my opinion, 6 is probably too much. If I bump it up even more, say all the way to 15, I mean, this is far from the look I'm trying to go for in this high pass filter adjustment. So I'm going to go back to 3 and see what that looks like. All I'm looking for are those subtle hints of the edges and the things that appear in the photo. So a radius of 3 in this instance looks decent, but in my opinion, it's actually a little bit still too strong. I'm looking in particular at this these floating shelves here near the sink. Like take for instance this little plate here next to the French press with the wording. It's still a little strong. If I go all the way down to 2, I mean 2 is pretty decent, but I can tell I've lost a little bit of detail C in these clear glasses. So let's do 2.5. Yeah, that's decent. That looks all right. So we'll hit OK, and now we have this high pass filter added to our image. Clearly, we're not going to leave it like this. So we're going to change the blending mode from normal to overlay. Now, a lot of photographers will just end it right there. And we've now added a pretty sharp look to our photo. If we zoom in here, looking at the detail in the basket, and then this plate of Oreos and the glasses up here, if we turn this layer off and on, now with the layer off, looking at this photo, now it almost looks hazy. And when we add the high pass filter on, now it looks pretty darn sharp. Here's the problem though. Usually, from what I've heard, adding a high pass filter like this adds noise and texture into the things that are generally lighter in your photo. So if we look here like at the marble backsplash and turn this off and on, we've definitely added some noise and some texture to what was otherwise a pretty smooth surface in real life. So I would prefer not to add this high pass filter sharpening look to the lighter tones in the photo. So to fix this, I'm going to turn the high pass layer off. And now we're going to mess with, I'm just going to call this layer 1. So now we're going to do some selection here with layer 1. And again, I apologize, it's cut off from the screen recording here, but I'm going to hit select. And we're going to go with color range. And what I'm going to select here are the highlights. Now, one adjustment that I always do across the board is I adjust the fuzziness to 65. I cannot give you the technical reason why. That's just a number I've messed with and a number I feel comfortable with time and time again. The one that you're going to have to adjust to taste is the range. So what we're trying to do is adjust how strong of a selection of the highlights we're going to make via the range slider. So since I use the marble as the example of where I would prefer it not to appear, I'm going to really focus on that. Now, I don't mind if that high pass sharpening look appears in the veins of the marble. I'm actually okay with that. I just would prefer it not to appear in the white or off-white parts of the countertops and the backsplash. So I'm going to adjust this range slider back down until I start to get some of that veining back. And I think I'm good at 170. So I'm going to hit OK. So now we have selected the highlights. What I want to do is invert this selection and flip it. So I'm going to hit Command Shift I, go back up to the high pass layer, turn it on, and now hit the button where it says add layer mask. For the most part, that high pass filter sharpening look has only been applied to the darker areas, and we bypassed kind of those lighter off-white and beige tones in the image. Now you can leave the photo there as is. The other thing I would suggest is maybe adjust how strong this layer appears in your photo as well. So with this high pass layer, I would grab the opacity and maybe adjust it accordingly. Again, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know I'm a big fan of going subtle, natural, and realistic. So if I turned it all the way off, that's what it looks like without. But if I added 100%, yeah, in my opinion, it's still a little too strong. So I might keep it at about, say, 70%. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. That's where I would leave it. So just to see it before and after, I'm going to hold Alt and then merge visible so I can get a pretty good idea of what the difference looks like before and after. So that's without the sharpening and with it back on. Without, with it on. So again, not a huge, massive difference, but maybe when you're nearing the end of your edit, you would just like to add that cherry on top of just adding that much more sharpening to your photo. Well, that'll do it for this video. If you got anything out of it, please make sure to hit the thumbs up button. It helps out all the YouTube algorithms that happen in the background. It helps my channel out a lot. If it's your first time here, maybe consider subscribing. If you have any questions or thoughts about this process, make sure to leave them in the comments below, or you can even message me directly over my Instagram account. Feel free to follow me there, Matthew A. Photo. Well, that'll do it. If you made it all the way here to the end, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we'll see you on the next one.